Welcome to the Big Mike Fund Podcast, where you'll learn about advanced wealth building strategies from real estate investing to creating massive ROI and secured retirement profits. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, grab a notepad, and lean in. Because Big Mike has got the mic, starting now.
Welcome to the Big Mike Fund Podcast. I'm the Big Mike.
Mike Zlatnik, and today I'm joined by Brett Swarts. Hey, Brett.
Mike, great to see you again, sir. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for coming back on the podcast. A repeat guest, your great expertise in the DST, Deferred Sales Trust. But before we talk about the latest and greatest in the DST space, tell folks a little bit about your journey. You said before the meeting we started recording, you said you moved from California to Florida, San Agustin area. So how has it been? How's your journey in the San Agustin, Florida area?
Absolutely. Yeah. I just moved about 2 years ago now. And so it does still feel pretty new because I grew up, most of my world was California. We call it Taxifornia these days. Part of what we do is capital gains tax deferral. And a part of that is because of the, big challenges with tax these days. The government has a spending problem, which means we all have a tax problem. And so I grew up helping my mom and dad build real estate in mostly the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, East Bay Area of California, and then also in Sacramento. And from there, I studied and practiced at Marcus & Millichap, a multifamily brokerage and investments. And so that's where I kind of got the brains side of it right, and versus just the construction side. And then combining those all was really great for a while until the market crashed in 2008, and we saw friends, family, and clients lose half or all of their wealth. And we said there's got to be a better way to exit what could give you diversification, liquidity, and not have to suffer the time consequences of the 1031 exchange. And so that's when we learned about the Deferred Sales Trust. It's what we focus on now. But really, our big mission is to unlock, capital gains to multiply freedom and impact for families, for entrepreneurs, for the business owner, the person who owns Bitcoin. And they want to sell, but they have this huge capital gains tax, and then they want to also have a wealth plan that gives them flexibility, but they don't want to be stuck into just one asset class, right? You're in the Big Mike funding, right? And it's funding. Well, how cool is it if you can sell a real estate for $10 million, defer $4 million, and go put it into like a Big Mike fund and make excess cash on cash return versus just staying in the asset and making maybe 3 or 4%, right? And this is where we come into play, and we look at cash on cash return, we look at return on equity, and we look at really diversifying, right? Going into first position type of mortgages or different lending funds that give us some diversification versus just having to stay highly concentrated. So that's a little bit about my story. My wife and I are married. We have 5 kids, married over 15 years. And we love Florida. We also miss California too. California is a great place in so many ways. So we have a lot of family there. But yeah, we're really here to try to help people with capital gains tax exit planning.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing your adventure. You have a beautiful family. God bless.
Thank you. Thank
you. So just for the quick clarification, I've heard of DST used 2 ways. So Deferred Sales Trust and Delaware Statutory Trust. What's the difference?
Yeah. So a Delaware statutory trust, I want you to think 1031 exchange, right? And when you think 1031 exchange, I want you to think very specifically just investment real estate. So if you're a real estate investment owner, you can do a regular 1031 exchange. You can do a Delaware statutory trust or a Delaware 1031 exchange, but you can also do a deferred sales trust. And the biggest difference between the Delaware and a deferred sales trust is that a Delaware is just like a packaged pieces of real estate. Sometimes one property, sometimes 2 or 3, sometimes a number of properties, but it's packaged and you have no control, no liquidity, no diversification. It's what we call sleepy mailbox money. Like you're basically just putting it with a group and they're just, returning sometimes around 5% is the average, I would say. Very large fees, sometimes 10 to 15% of every dollar is going into fees. So very expensive. That's the Delaware statutory trust. Now, the deferred sales trust is super flexible, right? So if I wanted to go into Big Mike's fund and I'm selling, again, a $10 million asset, I can put it in, I can sell the real estate or the business or the Bitcoin. I can defer all the tax and I can diversify it into real estate funding or hard assets or to stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, or sit in T-bills at 5%, or use it to start a next business venture, right? So it's a nice way to do all of those things. I can put it back into Bitcoin. We had one client who sold a $13.5 million car wash in San Diego with 3 other partners. They all deferred their tax, and one of them put it into Bitcoin at $40,000 a coin, right? For some of it, and it shot up to about $65,000 a coin, right? Which is a cool way. They sold high and they bought it at a good price. They're also buying into hotels. They're buying into gas stations. They're buying into apartment complexes. They're also putting into a lending fund. And so it really gives you that flexibility to defer that tax and multiply your wealth.
So now let's dive into, I appreciate that clarification, but how does it really work? Just remind the audience, because it's a deferred sales trust. So it sounds like you could trade in and out of assets, like Bitcoin is an example, or anything appreciated assets, or be taken from growth-oriented, appreciated type of investment into income focused. So crypto, somebody bought a Bitcoin when it was way cheap, and at this point it's not producing cash flow, and they want to diversify not only cash flow production but move to real estate. So it's just walk us through mechanically the process. How does it work, and then how do they move that liquidity into a more income-oriented investment? And then also, how does IRS look at this? How do you get the deferral where IRS doesn't say, wait a minute, this is some kind of a tax shenanigans, we want our fair share?
Yeah, absolutely. Here we go. So we'll start with the legal part, and we'll talk about how it works, right? So one of the biggest things to understand on the deferred sales trust is how is this thing legal? Like, why haven't I heard about it? Why isn't the IRS just really upset about it, or why aren't they just shutting it down? Well, the reality is there's laws on the books, right, that allow us to do tax deferral, and most of us know the IRAs, the 401ks. We know the 1031 exchange. These are all part of the IRS tax code, by the way. There's also IRC 453, which is an installment sale type of method to reporting and structuring a sale. Whereas, Mike is selling a $10 million asset in New York, and that basis is zero. If he were to sell, he's going to pay me about 40% of that in capital gains tax. But if he sets it up as an installment sale, meaning he's taking that 10 million back over time, he can defer that capital gains taxes. So this is known as a seller carryback. So that's basically how it works. And that's also why it's legal, in the sense that government has given us these laws to do, to execute, right? And so we need to set it up before the close of escrow. We need to set it up and have the trust in place to receive the capital before the close of escrow. Unless you're in a 1031 exchange, then you can use our best 1031 exit plan, and we can do it within a 1031 as well. But both sales, if they're business, primary homes, Bitcoin, we need to set it up prior to. So kind of to answer part of your question, for the Bitcoin seller that we helped, she had a $50,000 worth of Bitcoin. Well, that $50,000 value went to $50 million of value in Bitcoin, okay? So she never sold until she met us, and not so much that we had a way to, she never sold because she didn't have a great place to put it. Also, she didn't have a great tax deferral plan. So she met us, we gave her that great tax deferral plan, and she had a place to invest it, which was back into a business venture with a business partner. So she took 5 million of Bitcoin, and we actually opened up a Kraken account in a trust account, and we had the Bitcoin transferred to that trust account. And she got a promissory note, and the trust sold the Bitcoin to cash. And so now there's 5 million in cash at Kraken. And then we sent that to Charles Schwab. And then from there, she was able to invest it passively into a business venture, but she could also put it into a real estate fund. She also put some of it into the stock market. And so that's the cool thing about this. It's a legal proven strategy, close to 30-year track record, close to 30 no change IRS audits, and thousands of transactions. And that's really the important part. There's lifetime audit defense in place. And this is not something we're trying out. This is a proven legal structure that we have executed over many, many years. And we help people every single day understand what it is and how it works.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So it would work the same way as if somebody sold and got paid their money over, let's call it 40 years. So DST essentially so let's use an example, $50 million sale of the Bitcoin, right? So does she have to pay every year some kind of tax? Because it's over time, right? Is that how it works? She deferred the tax liability over many years, and how many years? Is that a similar concept?
You nailed it. You nailed it. It's basically that simple, right? So in her scenario, she did 5 million. So we'll use that number. Then we'll go to the $50 million number. Her scenario is 5 million. And for the first, I think, 6 or 12 months, she actually took no distributions from the 5 million. And we wrote an interest rate on the note of about 8 or 9%. Okay. And so on the $5 million at 8%, that's about a $400,000 cash flow. And so we invest the funds, we make about 400,000 or so. And she could take the payment and pay tax on that 400,000. And I think she delayed it for a period of time. And then when she started taking payments, she got taxed. And so she was only taxed as she receives payment. And that's really the key here, because on the 5 million, she would have paid about 1.85 million in tax. Let's just call it 2, right? So she would have had about 3. Instead, there's 5. Well, you don't have to dip into the principal. That's the 5. That's the cool thing, right? And then the interest is 400,000. Where you can just live off the interest. And most of our clients, they want maybe 250 a year or so, or maybe they want 400. But the point is, they may not need it in every single year or right away. So this gives you a strategy to defer the tax, also defer the income interest that it's accruing. Okay. And the trust operates typically at a no cost or no profit basis, meaning it's able to accrue the interest on the note, which expenses it on the trust tax return, which therefore has no tax. And so it's a very efficient way to build wealth, because you can do income tax deferral and capital gains tax deferral. Now, you do need to start receiving some money at some point. So it's not something where you can just say like, well, just put the 5 million in there and just let the 400 just roll. No, you do need to start receiving. Typically in about year 2 or so, we're giving about half the interest on the note that we're paying out. But the neat part is until then, you're not paying any tax. You're deferring all that tax.
Yeah, and I appreciate that clarification. It sounds like you pay on distributions only, and you structure the note in a manner to avoid taxes within the trust on a neutral basis, because the trust in general are taxed at a pretty high rate. So you got to make sure that the trust doesn't really make a profit, or where the profit is minimal. Is that essentially what I'm hearing from you?
You nailed it, Mike, right? And the trust tax levels by themselves are the highest rate, right? And so 99.9% of the time, year in and year out, the trust is operating at a paper loss, because it's able to expense the accrual of the interest. Even if it's not paying it out, it's able to expense the trustee fees. This is our role, right? We're the third party unrelated trustee, right? And the trust tax return. This is like, think of it more like a C Corp trust, right? And so it's like a new business venture that's been set up, new business trust, and it's able to expense that. So yeah, year in and year out. And the trust also bought the Bitcoin for 5 million, and it sold it for 5 million. Okay. So it has no gain at the trust level for that 5 and 5. And the interest it's accruing, it's able to expense that, right? And so that's the key here, that it enables it to typically operate at a loss, and therefore being very, very elegant way to build wealth.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So it sounds, too good to be true in some ways. And I have heard, again, this is not by any means anything other than there are rumors out there that DST is a red flag on a tax return. So I'm just asking the question straight up, because you're in the space, and folks saying, well, what if I do DST? Is this going to put me under an audit radar or a red flag to be audited? How much do I want that? So I'm just curious, how much of a red flag is it? How what percentage of the trusts that you've set up have gotten audited, or the owners have gotten audited? I'm just curious, because it might be completely by the book, but the risk of an audit by itself scares people. So it's nerve-wracking to be dealing with an IRS audit, million-pound gorilla knocking in your door and saying, you owe us some taxes. We think we do, or at least let us look into everything you got, and what else they're going to look at.
Yeah, let's cover that. I would say this is probably the biggest myth of the Deferred Sales Trust is, oh no, it's going to be an audit risk, or somehow that we're doing something that is outside the lines of the IRS tax code. Let me lay out some of the facts here. First of all, thousands of transactions, again, close to over 30 years, close to over 30 no change IRS audits. And the same way that you would do an installment sale is how you report the deferred sales trust. So the deferred sales trust has never been on an IRS watch list. It's never been on a dirty dozen list. It's never been, you have to report it on your return as, it's called a reportable transaction. Never been on that, right? It's literally batting 1,000, but there are those that are bloggers out there that would want to, that are misinformed or have misinformation because they want to keep you in what's called a 1031 exchange because that's kind of their world, or they just don't understand how we do this, right? And that's our, some of our competition, and I think sometimes it's also a good way to get someone to click on your article, right, to read. But the reality is, it's literally batting 1,000, billions and billions and billions of assets sold using it over the years. And one of the better stories that helps me to bring this to life is a gentleman named David Young, and David Young built a company with a gentleman named Bill Gross called Pimco. Okay. And they built this with 5 other guys from 80 billion to 1.2 trillion about 20 years ago. And they managed some of the biggest wealth in the entire world. And you can imagine guys, gals come to them with tax strategies that they should, look at for their clients. And David says that, well, he says, most of them are just not worth the trouble, right? They're not proven. They don't have a track record. They go outside the lines. They're offshore. All these things that are, challenging for other tax deferral strategies. Well, we said, take a closer look at our strategy. And he did, kept an open mind. He signed the NDA with his legal team, and they did a 2-year due diligence on the structure and the strategy. And after 2 years of that and a couple days of a little mini summit to understand it really clearly, they came through with 2 conclusions. Number one, the creator of the structure, one of my business partners, he's the tax attorney and CPA who created this. He's a genius, and he's a genius. He's really smart. But number 2, it's the smartest person they've ever met, or one of the top ones. Number 2, they're all in. They're part of the inner circle, right? And they'll manage capital and help build the wealth plan for the DST clients of ours. And this is something that they do. And so we always say to the skeptic or the person who's cautious out there, and you should be, right? You should ask your CPA. You should seek, independent legal, advice on these kind of things. You shouldn't just take it at face value off of a podcast, right? Jump in the calls with us. But if it's good enough for David Young and his legal team after 2 years of due diligence, is it good enough for me, Mike, or whoever else is listening to this, right? Where we would say on the other side is people who do not engage their CPA. They don't pay their CPA the money to get on there. They're paying it to them last minute. They're not bringing the planning involved. They're not engaging and having a robust discussion on this. And they're just looking at a blog, and then they let fear, grip them, and they just end up paying the tax. Well, I can tell you, like Michael Jordan said, right? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? And so we don't think it's a risk. In fact, we're a very low audit risk. To answer your other question, trusts are the lowest audit risk, okay? Although the highest tax rates are the lowest audit risk. Out of thousands and thousands and thousands of transactions, okay, we're very low audit risk. The way that you report the installment sale as a deferred sales trust or a regular installment sale, Mike, is the exact same way. It's the exact same form, right? So this is a big myth. Like, people think that you're doing something that's odd or out of the box. Like, if you do a seller carryback, Mike, for a property you're selling, are you concerned that if you're going to get an audit that you're going to be outside of the rules? No, right? And if you put it on the same form that you put the deferred sales trust, are you concerned that you're going to get a higher audit risk? No, it's the same form, right? And even when you get audited, the tax attorney provides lifetime audit defense at no additional charge, and they have a perfect track record with that. So that would be my feedback for anyone thinking about if it's too good to be true, if it's legal.
Yeah, and I appreciate that explanation. So next question, what is this really good for? In other words, is this good for any appreciated asset sale, or is it specific asset classes? Is it just generic? Obviously, real estate, people do 1031. It's a very specific technique. But can people sell anything? Appreciated value, appreciated building, appreciated stock, appreciated crypto, appreciated commodity, appreciated business, and then move the money into anything they want? I mean, I'm sure there are rules that you have to meet. I'm just curious, kind of like, what does it work for? And what's a typical kind of, you've seen a lot of these cases versus theoretically you could do anything, but what do you see people do commonly?
Yeah, well, it all depends on their vision for their wealth plan and their legacy, right? And it depends on their risk tolerance. It depends on how where they want to be entrepreneurial or they want to be retired, right? Passive or active. But first of all, to answer your question, what does the deferred sales trust work for? It works for any asset of any kind as long as it has $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain. So it's got to be big enough, right? So does it have $1 million gain? I bought it for $1 million, it's worth $2 million. Right. I bought it for 3 million and it's worth 5 million. It's got at least $1 million gain plus. Okay. Number two, does it have at least $1 million net proceeds? Right. So if you're selling something for $250,000 and it's got $50,000 of debt and it's got $100,000 of gain, it's too small. So make sure it's big enough. That's number one. But it can be any asset of any kind. It can be a business. It can be real estate, primary home or investment real estate. It can be Bitcoin. We've done NFTs. It can be a stock sale. Okay. It can be carried interest. It can be captive insurance. It could be a helicopter. It could be any asset of any kind. That's what's so unique about this versus the 1031 exchange. It only works for investment real estate. So the deferred sales trust works for any asset of any kind. Now to answer your question about what's the common maybe allocation or investments that clients are going into? Well, for a couple of years, we've been in a very, let's say, wait and see mode. In fact, we've been putting into real estate lending funds, like a Big Mike fund, right? Where sometimes it's 6 months, 12 months, 24-month type of terms. And we've been making about 10% on our money or so, and we've been sitting, we call it kind of on the sidelines, right? And I call it semi-liquid, right? Or every few months liquid, right? We've also sat in T-bills making about 5%. And we've been waiting for the real estate market to come down. We sold it, a lot of our clients at the high in the peak before the interest rates jumped. And so that's been a strategy. But now what are we doing? Well, we're buying back into real estate now, right? And we're doing what our parents taught us to do, sell high and buy low. So now we're buying back into hotels and multifamily, mobile home parks and industrial properties, and also lending. Lending is also still a great place to be. And so the key component here is we're diversifying and we're dollar cost averaging and we're buying in what makes a lot of sense, right? And it's different for different clients. Different clients have different risk tolerances, have different comfort levels of different investment allocations. We work with financial advisors across the country as well and real estate fund managers. So it's definitely a customized approach here. It's not a one size fits all, but generally speaking, we're at least keeping 20% in what's we call it semi-liquid or liquid investments, right? And the other, 50 to 80% are going into a mix of real estate and maybe some securities or some lending. So those are the main ways that people are investing with the deferred sales trust today.
Yeah, understood. I guess you have some liquidity requirement as part of the structure. That's why you have to have 20% liquid or close to liquid. And then income-oriented strategies work better than the growth for pure growth. At least this is on the redeployment side, right? They can be selling anything, but they sounds like they have to you have to follow some rules, and you as a trustee, your company would put some some guardrails.
Yeah, give or take, right? So we do have a general rule of thumb, right, that you should keep about 20% in liquid or semi-liquid investments, right? So be able to access some of the capital. Do we have some clients that maybe go above that mark? They do. It's because they don't need or want any of the funds right away. They have other liquidity other places, and they're partnering with the trust maybe in some kind of project that's going to take a little bit longer to really bear the fruit of the harvest, if you will, right? So it'll take a couple of years for the development. And so you can be a real estate developer, you can develop with the funds, you can invest into other people's funds. It's very flexible, okay? And so, but there's some general rule of thumbs that we do like to follow.
Let me ask you a tough question. Probably people have asked you many times, but I have a good friend. We were just chatting, and he does infinite banking, whole life insurance policy. I'm curious if people can basically overfund a whole life policy as part of the DST strategy and have access to liquidity, because these policies are highly liquid in general. I don't know if it's even possible. It just kind of dawned on me to ask you the question.
Yeah, it's a good question, Mike. So we're not as we haven't done that a lot, okay? And we do have a client who's doing that now and is looking at that. The key is that whatever funds you receive to your personal account, you can't borrow against the trust, right? So a lot of people go, well, if I put 10 million in, let me just borrow out $3 million and get a line of credit and a margin account and just go spend it on what I want. That's a taxable event, right? So a lot of times people are going into whole life insurance policies because they can put it in there, then they can basically borrow against it, right? And get arbitrage and then have the debt paid off when they die, right? The big payout. And so that would be a taxable event. Now, Are there ways that we can structure it where you can get a whole life policy? Yeah. And in fact, we would encourage the cash flow off of the trust that you deferred on the from the sale, right? Extra gains. For example, a $120,000 deal or a $2.5 million deal that was producing $120,000 in NOI was in California. We helped them sell their apartment complex. We increased their NOI to about 190 with the trust, right? So that extra arbitrage could be used to fund a life insurance policy, right? Now you pay taxes on that $70,000, the extra 70 that you're receiving, but that could be used to fund it. And so that's kind of a way that we would look at that. Is my best answer for the life insurance policy, but we absolutely can see us working with that. Just realize that I kind of know where you're going. Like if you want to just borrow against the life insurance policy or borrow against the trust and have that personally to do whatever you want with, that's going to be taxable. However, you can partner with the trust to invest into real estate. That's cool, right? As long as it's an investment or invest into a business venture, that's great. You know, clients love that about this.
So explain that if you just sell and the assets are going in the trust and the trust invests, as long as you don't take the money out of the trust, you're not paying taxes. But you can partner with the trust on a deal that generates let's call it friendly money, right? The trust loans the money at a friendly terms. Is that what you're referring to? Where
Well, it's not lending, it's investing, right? And so it's a joint venture partnership, and it's you're going to get the majority of the ownership the way we structure it. The trust is going to get a preferred return. You're going to be the GP running the deal, right? And the trust is going to be a silent LP, if you will, right? That's a good way to think about it. But it's not GP LP; it's a joint venture, right? So it's just one person going in with you, right? And the person being the trust itself. So the trust is typically going to put up all the capital. You're going to do all the work. Right, you're going to sweat equity, but you're going to get the majority of the ownership. The trust is going to get a preferred return and some of the equity upside. That's the way we structure it to keep it, helping you to accomplish what you want to accomplish, and yet still have the trust as the ability to have some upside. And that's really the key. The trust has to have the ability to make profit, which gives it the business purpose that it needs to stay legal.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Next question is how much does it cost for folks to set it up? How long does it take? Just kind of a basic idea. I remember last time we talked, I'm just going by memory. This is a few years ago. In the early podcast days, I think you had a higher number than $1 million, if I remember correctly, unless my memory doesn't serve me correctly. So the bigger the numbers, the more of economy of scale kicks in. And minimum profit, minimum liquid makes sense. I thought the numbers were somehow higher before. So just kind of comment on that as far as how long, what are the expenses to make the numbers work?
Yeah, great question. So what are the fees for the deferred sales trust? And so there's really two sets of fees. There's the one-time fee. It's about 1.5 to 2. It's about 1.5 to 1.25 on the gross sales price. Okay, so it's a one-time fee. So if it's $1 million sale, it's like $15,000 one time. It covers lifetime audit defense. That's the legal fee. The second fee is the trustee fee, and that's an annual recurring fee. Our company, Capital Gains Tax Solution, serves as the trustee, and that's about 1.5 to 2% on the net proceeds into the trust. And so if the net proceeds were about $1 million, it'd be about $15,000 to $20,000 per year. And that includes no matter how and where you invest the funds, whether it be 100% into stock market, would it be 100% into passive real estate or 100% into your own real estate or own business venture? It's about 1.5 to 2%, no matter how and where you invest the funds. There's the miscellaneous fees of the tax return and the P&L statements and that kind of thing. That's about $1,500 to $1,700, kind of that range. But our overall goal, typically, and why people love it, is we're typically going to return 7, 8, 9, sometimes even 7, 8, 9% compounding net of those recurring fees, right? So if you put 10 million in and we defer 4 million of tax, we're typically on that 10 million going to earn, let's say, $800,000, 8% per year on average, net of the recurring fees, right? So if the recurring fees are about 1.5 to 2, we're going to earn about 9.5 to 10. Now on 10 million, you get a little bit of a fee break, right? Depending on how you invest the funds. And we have the fee breaks at 3, 5, 10 and 20. So you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to apply for a no-cost consultation, and then we can we'll show you all the fees, or just email us and we'll be able to provide you for the fees.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So I heard it's a 1.5% a year, 1.5% upfront, plus minus a little bit of a range.
That's a good way to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like in the hard money lending space, it's 1.5 points upfront, and then you pay an annual asset management fee of 1.5%, something like that.
That's a good way to think about it. Exactly. And you can either pay that big tax of 20, 30, 40, 50% of your proceeds, or you can defer it all. The other thing that we're doing too, Mike, is a little bit different than it was a couple of years ago, is now we're cash flowing our fee, right? So on the close of escrow, if 10 million hits the account and we would have made $150,000 to $200,000 on that deal, we're going to wait about 60 days or so and invest the funds and get the money churning, right? Get the cash flow coming in. And then about day 60 or so, we're going to receive that payment, right? So our goal is to keep that proceeds intact versus dipping into that as much as we can.
Yeah, understood. I appreciate that explanation. And I think you mentioned this a couple of times, but what's the best way for folks to reach out if they want to learn more about DST? And I think you have a book on the shelf somewhere. Yeah,
there it is. Yeah, absolutely. You can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com or brettswarts.com and to access everything that we have. But the other place that I would encourage you to start is get the book, right? And read the book. It's called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. And it's a #1 bestseller on Amazon. We have Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank in the book. And it's really the proven playbook for unlocking your ideal wealth plan when selling any asset of any kind for yourself or for your clients. So whether you're a real estate fund manager, whether you're a financial advisor, whether you're an entrepreneur or business owner or investor, you want to pick up the book because it can help you execute on this strategy. And that's the key. You need to set this up prior to the close of escrow. Unless you're doing a 1031, then you can get the best 1031 exit plan with us. And that'll allow you to get a regular 1031 or a backup plan into the Deferred Sales Trust. But you're going to want to get the book, and you want to contact us right away, capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. We also have the podcast, Capital Gains Tax Solutions, you can check out as well. That is a great place to start as well, on our YouTube channel too.
Thank you, Brett. I appreciate your sharing. Thank you for sharing the book and letting folks know how they would reach out. So thank you kindly, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Mike. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you for listening to the Big Mike Fund Podcast. To receive your copy of Mike's How to Choose a Smart Real Estate Fund book, head to bigmikefund.com or visit Amazon and type Mike Zlotnick. Keep listening and keep investing Big Mike style. See you on the next episode.